started.
The game has started, and it was actually a line that I wanted to see in the first game, and they're playing it.
What's happening, David?
Yeah, so it started as the Reti opening, and now it's gone into a variation we call the King's Indian attack. Not the King's Indian defence, which is normally for black, where you kind of react to one d4. Here, white has set up in this exact same way the King's Indian formation. If you look at the white king, the white bishop in front of it, this is the King's Indian. But it's the King's Indian attack simply because you have white. You have the extra move, you get the centre, and there's actually a pawn sacrifice on show right now from Magnus Carlsen. But I'm not sure whether Ding is going to accept the sacrifice. Clearly, the computer, look at the bar, it thinks black can get greedy and grab a pawn. Ding, meanwhile, smiling slightly, head in his hands, because he's trying to work out what is happening. And right now, black has a nice pawn structure, but if you want to be ambitious, if you want to be greedy, you might grab this pawn in the middle of the board. This pawn is actually under fire twice. After a recapture, the black knight can pounce, but Magnus's whole idea is that he's not materialistic. He doesn't care about pawns. He's just going to jump into the center with his knight. And look at this white bishop. Suddenly, it has a whole bunch of targets. And this sacrifice is actually long-term as well. Even if we see a trade of knights, even if we see a trade of queens, then in this type of position, Magnus has a huge advantage because black's bishop is locked in at home forever. Look at the two white bishops pointing towards this side of the board. Black's pieces on that side, under pressure, never going to get out. And I think, despite the pawn deficit, white has a winning advantage. I don't think Ding should get greedy. It's tempting, but here you have plenty of choice for black. You can just maybe push a pawn forward. That's very typical. What else could you play? I mean, you could move your bishop, maybe. Lots and lots of choice. Simon, do you think he's going to capture this pawn?
I don't think Ding likes defending too much. So if he takes there, he's gonna go into defending game for the rest of the game. OK, he's material up, but I think he prefers sacrificing material. And this setup from Magnus is actually, to my eyes, very, very unique. Black's gone for the French defence, a setup I do very often against the King's Indian attack. And I've never seen this kind of A4 move. And the other advantage of Magnus's pawn over here is it stops black's normal plan, which is advancing his B pawn. So you're trying to get some space on the queen side as well. So I'm just wondering what black should do here. It's not so easy to find a straightforward plan, and Magnus has a number of ways he can proceed. So an interesting position to my eyes, at least.
If it is the French defence.
It's a French defence setup that black's played, yeah.
And then I can tell you that before today, that had been played only 6 times so far.
I mean, when I say it is, maybe I'm not really sure. It kind of is. I might be cheating there a little bit. Black's kind of gone for a French defence, but not against E4. I don't know.
It's like half a Reti opening, half a French defence, half a King's Indian attack.
It's a hybrid, a love child of the French defence.
All right. Well, but if it is a French, then that has a very good score for black this season, 58%. Yeah.
That's huge.
That's
yeah.
Especially for an opening which kind of has been frowned upon at the very, very top level for years, the French defence. I mean, it's a perfectly viable opening. It leads to really fun positions for both sides, but you very rarely see the world champion, the top few in the world, play it. So.
And Reti, 50-50.
50-50.
Yeah. Only 10 games played. 10 games played, and it's 50-50. 4 wins for black, 4 wins for white.
We've seen 2 Retis now between these two. So the first one was a draw.
Let's grab the pawn, David, as well.
50-50 opening then.
Yeah. He has a pawn up, though, and I actually showed this on the analysis board a few moments ago. It looks pretty good for white if black kind of just goes for simple trades and swaps everything off, and he has done that.
Yeah.
Look at the clock times as well. Magnus, he's played every move instantly.
I mean, this must be home preparation from Magnus, you'd imagine, because you sack a pawn, you must have looked at it at home, even if you can see there's compensation. It's not something you really should go into blindfolded. So he must know that white's just got at least adequate. Well, you thought it was really good compensation, David. You really like white's position, right?
At least if I'm seeing this for the first time, fresh, I haven't studied it for black, I would be terrified to take a pawn. And look at those white bishops now, they're just beautiful. Maybe there are ideas such as counter-attacking against the white bishop in the centre now. Maybe black could offer a trade of dart-squared bishops.
Yeah,
I think you shouldn't rush to trade the queens. The tension, you should wait for your opponent to take the queens. You don't want to lose a move, spend the move, exchanging on your opponent's terms. So I think queen takes queen here would be a mistake from Ding.
Yeah, it certainly improves the placing of white's rook. But I agree with you. I mean, black probably should be looking at locking out the dark squared bishop, as you mentioned, because white's light squared bishop, that's a beast. It's never going to be challenged. And it's so difficult for Ding to even come up with a way to even think about developing all his pieces on the left side of the board. Challenging times. And whilst we're waiting for Ding to make a decision, well, we do have a quiz of the day where we're asking, what is your best tip to improve chess openings? And everyone has been so helpful and so generous. I mean, it's so lovely to see. And Warren De Silva says that their top tip for improving chess openings is to find, and this is really good advice, a top player who has mastered and regularly plays the respective chess opening you're interested in and analyse their games. So don't choose like what I called jokingly a hobby player. You know, a hobby player's like, actually, I'm going to rephrase that because I came out wrong. So don't place out, you know, like a top grandmaster who like occasionally plays one openings. Choose one who consistently plays it.
Got it.
So, okay, well, we have seen Ding make some trades. I didn't expect that at all.
I don't really understand. Could he not have done the same thing with the queens on the board? I mean, here it just feels like white's rook now on the open line. It feels like such great compensation. Black has ignored the threat against his own knight. He's counterattacking against white's bishop in the centre of the board. But, I mean, I would be tempted to either allow that trade or to push a pawn to support white's bishop now. Maybe you could move that white bishop away. Lots and lots of options for Magnus Carlsen, but it is all to do with white's active pieces. White's rook on the open line, white's bishop's pointing towards the left side, where there will be serious pressure later. Simon, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of liked your pawn move. Kind of looked nice. I mean, the problem is if you take the bishop here, and maybe we can show that, which bishop takes bishop, a natural move, can't be bad. The knight recaptures, and it seems like the black knight is quite well positioned here to help the black bishop develop. I mean, it's all about black developing his pieces here. So I don't really want that knight to get to that square. So that's why if we go back a couple of moves to the current position, the move pawn to f4 seems quite interesting, because again, if you have the exchange of bishops like before, the difference now is that black's bishop can't move and the black knight is also in some trouble here. Where does it go? It might be lost. It might just be losing this position. Well, okay, you can maybe defend it somehow, but I kind of like the pawn move. I mean, that feels like a logical move to me, but maybe there's, you know, there's a lot of ways you can play this position. Even playing bishop takes knight is maybe not ridiculous, but I wouldn't really want to do that move. That's kind of the last move, giving you the bishop pair, unless I had to, really.
So this bishop pair. I mean, you're right there, Simon. Just by process of elimination as well. If we backtrack to the current position, white's pawn pushing forward, what can black actually play here? His knight is completely, utterly trapped. The black knight is under fire. You have to trade off these bishops. I think you have to support it with the black pawn. And at the very, very minimum, there will be lines such as capturing this knight and jumping in with the white knight. I
mean, maybe knight c3 there, David. I mean, it gives you a horrible, or knight d2, but knight c3 before capturing on e4. Because, again, it's all about black's queen side. How does black get his queen side out? And you could get this kind of position where it's so hard for black to develop. And the a-pawn's very well... It looks very comfortable for white. And I would say that, again, Magnus's preparation has been a notch above Ding, but last time this happened, Ding did take control later on when Magnus made a mistake. I mean, saying that, though, Magnus has a very easy position to play here, so it's very hard to go wrong, I guess.
I actually love this position for white, and I love the move that Dave is highlighting, but also the white rook on the corner could also mobilise up a3 and start attacking some pawns. And, oh...
Black's like bishop is just stuck at home. Black has no control over the dark squares. Black is temporarily one pawn up, but I mean, I think it's more than sufficient compensation for white here. And as Simon mentioned, this is pretty much instantly possible in the current position. That position is almost forced if white pushes his pawn forward now and protects his bishop. I mean, just looking at all the options, this looks by far the most tempting. You also have very many alternatives after a trade. And in this position, for example, the other one I mentioned, just trading off, yes, you kind of have this knight for bishop imbalance, but if you compare the pieces, white's knight is about to regain the extra pawn for black, and it's going to sit on a beautiful outpost that black can never challenge in just a couple of moves. Yeah, it looks like a Magnus type of position. It's not just the fact he might have an advantage objectively. It's a Magnus type of position. It's not a type of position that Ding likes to defend. And that makes me think that, OK, Ding now head in his hand. Makes me think that the opening has been a success for white.
Yeah, and you both mentioned how Magnus has been very well prepared in this particular line, and I just want to talk to you about a question from Stardog, who says, do you think that Magnus is still training as befits a full professional, or does he no longer take the whole chess thing so seriously? It says, maybe David knows.
I mean, I don't think we can question Magnus's professionalism, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
he's still #1 by a big distance. He's still a world champion. He still wins most tournaments he plays in.
But do you think he's kind of like, do you think he's training like 8 hours a day?
He talked about this in the Puma interview, right, with Carlsen Warholm, that his aim now is to reach 2,900, right? And he said that if I want to do that, I have to give it 100% every single day. Everything I do, everything I eat, everything I sleep has to evolve around that, because it's going to be so difficult. So maybe it's about having that goal for him.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has some goals left. I mean, he's talked about the World Championship. That's one thing. I think let's keep that separate for now. But he still wants to win every game. You can see that day to day on the tour. We talked about 2,900. I mean, he works out all the time with a view to chess. He still has full-time coaches employed, like Peter Heine Nielsen. You don't do that if you're not professional. Yeah. So I don't think that could be questioned. I think he's still got plenty to give. And OK, interesting moment. I just got distracted by the game because white's given up another pawn. And here, white is 2 pawns down. But he's got maximum control over the position. If you look on this long diagonal, the white long diagonal towards that black rook, everything is just trapped for black. Black can never move his light squared bishop out. Interesting decision, and a very professional decision from Magnus Carlsen, I feel. And yeah, I mean, I would already be terrified for survival for Ding, despite the computer saying 0.0. It's just about whether Magnus can improve the white rooks. 2 pawns is a lot, but
yes,
it's white in control.
So I do love games like this because, OK, it's 2 pawns, but it's like you're always thinking about what your opponent can do. And just look at black's queenside pieces. He's 2 pieces down. He's a rook down in the corner and a bishop down in the corner. And these guys, they need to get out at some point, otherwise you just lose. And it's quite artistic that they just can't really get out. I mean, you can't move the bishop because it gets captured by the rook. And if you can't move the bishop, you can't move the rook. You can't fianchetto the bishop. So if you try moving the b pawn, well, you'll lose your rook. It'll be captured by white's pawn, for example. So how on earth do you ever get those queenside pieces out? And it's really, I find these positions extremely picturesque. Just real torture, like, tying your opponent down. I mean, you still have to win it. You still have to progress somehow, which is the next stage. But it's very tricky for Ding, I think, this particular position.
Yeah, and for example, Simon, if the black bishop goes back now, I think Magnus will instantly push this pawn forward just to stop black from kind of pushing in the centre and freeing up his bishop here. And I mean, for example, if you give black a timeout, maybe he can push this pawn, get his bishop out somehow. Maybe he can survive if he frees his pieces, but Magnus will not allow that. Magnus will just push his pawn forward and he'll say, OK, now you can't break here. If you can't break here, it means your bishop, rook are trapped, as you mentioned there, Simon, and I don't see what black's going to do over the next 10, 15 moves. Still, you need to win it as white. I'm not sure exactly what the winning plan is. Maybe you could combine pushing on this side of the board with maybe putting some pressure on black's queen side here. You can kind of combine 2 ideas, but how depressing is it going to be for Ding if he has to just sit and wait and do nothing?
Yeah.
Also, this black rook can never challenge the central line as well. This open file is completely dominated by white because this key square is controlled by the white bishop. Black's rook can never fight for that key line.
I do feel that white can probably take his pick of the plans, maybe advance as much as possible on the right side of the board in a very safe way that keeps control. And then when he chooses to, he can initiate operations on the left when it's great for him.
What about this plan? At some point,
Yep.
bringing the white king over and just winning and entering the position.
I love
Maybe you
it.
have that luxury. Maybe you have the time.
I think
Torture.
it's great.
Yeah. OK, he doesn't push this pawn. I'm surprised. Instead, he goes after this black pawn. Maybe it's still good. Maybe this black pawn push in the centre, trying to free up the black bishop, is not actually so effective. But I'm surprised. I thought, why not lock it down as much as possible if you could? So I'm expecting Ding at some point to try and push this pawn just to free up his trapped pieces over here. And yeah, meanwhile, I'm very surprised the evaluation bar says 0.0 because we're miles away from any draw here. Ding has to fight just to survive.
Wow, and
just to get his pieces out.
Clock is ticking for him. He has 4 minutes less than Magnus on the clock in what David describes as almost a desperate situation.
Yeah,
getting close to it, maybe.
Yeah, it's just a full bind. It's as if someone's just kind of trapped you in a prison cell and you just can't escape. Thrown away the key. How'd you get out?
Python strategy at its finest, right?
Yeah,
just totally squeezing the life out of the position. I think this is my favorite type of chess, like Simon referenced as well, because every move comes with a point and it comes with intelligence. And just take a look at Black's, pieces. Those on the left can't move, and those on the right, they just don't know what to do. And it's like you've kind of bamboozled your opponent.
Literally, what can Ding even do here? I mean, he has to push a pawn near the Black King. Well, now he finally pushes his central pawn.
Yeah,
I think he needed to do this.
I still like your move better, David, your f4, than what Magnus has done. Probably don't tell him that, I don't know. But because at least Black's getting his pieces out now. We were talking about Black's queen side. And, I mean, again, Magnus moves the rook, but you have some chances to get your queenside pieces out now because you've been allowed to at least free your position up a little bit by that last pawn move. Yeah. But what's Magnus' plan now with this rook e3?
Just wants to win some pawns back, I guess.
Yeah.
You mentioned there Black's bishop can come out at some point, and for example, it can come out now and attack the white rook, gain a bit of time. But even if the white rook just moves, I'm not exactly sure where, for example, but if it just slides across one square, now there's a double attack against this pawn, 2 white rooks lining up. But also this black pawn is about to drop. For example, if you guard your central pawn, it's not just the fact that this pawn drops to the white bishops, but once the black rook moves away now from the attack, it's the corner pawn that drops, and suddenly white has a passed pawn on this side of the board, and we might see something similar in the game later. Meanwhile, in the current position, Black has indeed guarded in the centre, and I'm expecting Magnus now to try and make use of this pin to try and push his pawn forward.
And we're only in move 21. Would you say this is a success out of the opening for Magnus?
Massive success.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very one-sided traffic again. I think in order to save this game, Ding needs to give back his extra pawns and then get his pieces active. But that's still a long way away. It's a distant dream at the moment, Ding just getting his pieces out, let alone equalising, let alone holding the draw.
And it's actually Magnus Carlsen's main man, his trainer, Peter Heine Nielsen's birthday today. So I guess a good way for Magnus to celebrate him by playing something great in the opening that probably Peter has been involved in somehow.
I think it's Eric Hansen's 30th birthday as well.
Is it? A happy birthday to Eric Hansen and a happy birthday to Peter Heine Nielsen.
Yeah, birthdays galore.
Yep.
And yeah, Peter Heine, I definitely feel the kind of Peter Heine Nielsen's touch on this opening. It feels like he's fed Magnus with this type of idea, and Magnus has taken it to another level, put it on the board. And yeah, I mean, no great chess player can come up with great opening ideas every single day. You need that team around you. So.
And do you know how old Peter Heine is turning today?
Yes.
Do you know it?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not allowed to answer.
Okay.
Oh no, I hate getting ages wrong.
If you're going to guess.
Oh no, 50, 45, 46,
47?
40.
It's actually 49.
49.
Because I was just super shocked when I saw he looks like, and I mean, not even as a compliment. I really mean it. I thought maybe 40, maybe 40.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's getting close to 50.
My maths was wrong there. I remember playing him in a youth versus experience event in 2010.
I know he's been around a bit, so that's why I knew he's a bit older. Yeah, so...
I mean, he was in the experience section at 2010. He was only in his 30s. What's up with that?
Wow.
Oh, wow, that's a bit cheating. So, yeah.
Great player, though, as well as a second and coach.
Yeah, and helping Magnus to some great success, probably in the opening of this game. Still liking it for Magnus?
Yes. I like the fact that Ding's bishop is out, that Ding's at least not completely trapped within his prison, within his cage any longer, but still some serious questions to answer. We mentioned White's light squared bishop going and taking one of Black's pawns. You still have to defend against that. Black's pawn in the centre of the board is about to fall. and I don't think you can keep everything intact. I'm trying to find a move here for black, to be honest. I'm still struggling, and Ding, 5 minutes down on the clock. It's an endgame, but it's not the typical type of endgame where you can just calculate your way out, where you can rely on previous knowledge, pattern recognition. This is very unique, this type of situation.
Yeah. If I had to choose, I probably would try to hold on to the b7 pawn, was what I was going to say, you know, give up the centre one, hope that one gets taken off, because at least then the bishops get some freedom. But Magnus is not going to do, he's not going to just get greedy and capture pawns. I think he's going to try to keep control.
Yeah, I mean, how do you keep control? That is the question for Magnus Carlsen now. Because there is the option of capturing black's central pawn with your own pawn, restoring some semblance of material parity, but what next? That's the big question. And if you don't go for that, as you mentioned, Jovanka, what are the options? Do you just push pawns forward? For example, white's h-pawn can step forward 1 square, attacking black's light squared bishop.
That was my vibe.
Maybe that's the start. Yeah.
Take some space, ask questions where that light squared bishop is going to go.
Yeah, this light square bishop doesn't have too many squares, so you could kick it away, hit it first of all, and yeah, I'm not sure where it's going, to be honest. Okay, Magnus takes the kind of more direct approach, the route 1 approach. He captures this pawn in the center, and if Ding recaptures, then suddenly a bit of a question for this bishop. This bishop doesn't have too many squares. It's only real safe squares, this one, and then white can actually gain back both of the lost pawns. So now it's level material. It's not just level material, but white still has this target long term. Okay, Ding didn't want to go for this. He didn't want to open things up, but he's now, with this pawn push, allowed white a very nice passed pawn. There is a threat in the position. Black's bishop wants to come and skewer the 2 white rooks. They're both on the same diagonal, but this white pawn is surely going to be fantastic strength.
A mistake? It feels like feels like there's something wrong here, because like the white rook has now the possibility of going to the 7th rank. I realise there is a trick, but as you mentioned,
I mean, I'm not sure if it's anything direct. I don't think you need to be direct here for Magnus Carlsen. I think it's just a bit too desperate for Ding. And for example, let's just do nothing. Let's give a check. I want to force the black king in the corner, and then I just want to get out of this this kind of skewer. So one of the rooks, I mean, the white rook can go this way or it can go back. But say I just play an unambitious move. Let's go back. I, again, don't see really what black is doing long term. You have to keep an eye on this pawn, which means your rook is tied down forever. And at some point, this white pawn is going to push forward, tie down this black bishop. I don't think you need to be direct. Black's pieces are still not great. The king, the rook. One-way traffic, I feel. I mean, maybe there's something direct there, Jovanka, as you mentioned. Maybe.
I thought maybe kick back the bishop.
Okay.
Oh no,
attack this bishop.
That's not possible.
You do possibly allow counterattack against these rooks. So, I mean, I just feel like Magnus has done the hard work. Yes, he's still 1 pawn down, but it's not a pawn that's important. And why not just retreat, just keep everything nice and safe. At the right moment, bring your bishop in or bring your rook in, and or push this pawn. What is black doing in the meantime? I don't really see it.
Yeah.
Okay, Ding, meanwhile, leaving the board briefly, but he's back, and Magnus still thinking in the current position. Lots of choice for him. I think, sorry, this pawn might be the winner long term. What's the name of the e-pawn, Simon? You know all the names.
Well, I always called him Eddie, after Eddie the Eagle, who's quite a famous character in Norway as well, right? I mean, it's where he trained, but he was the ski jumper who was pretty terrible, but everyone loved him because he was the only ski jumper from England.
There's a movie about him as well.
It's a great movie, actually, Eddie the Eagle. Yeah, really, really worth watching. But yeah, I just agree with everything you're saying. I mean, it looks really hard for black. It's a horrible position to have to play for black as well. I mean, you're under pressure. You haven't really had any chance to break out. This last move I also don't like. I think he should have exchanged some pawns off and just try to pray of surviving in some ending. But by keeping more pawns on the board, you're also allowing white just have this very strong passed pawn in the middle of the board. This pawn that can, you know, maybe just win the game at some point. So yeah, Eddie. Yeah, that's it. So in general, I think if Magnus is careful here, it could be really tough. And that also, I mean, the way things are going, the final, I wanted to see. I'll be honest, nothing against the other players, but these two have had some great matches and they've always gone in Prag's way. It would be Magnus Carlsen versus Prag, and Prag has beaten Magnus on a couple of occasions now, and I just think that would be a great final, like, maybe a future world champion against the current world champion. So that for me, I mean, again, nothing against the Niche, who's played brilliantly, nothing against Ding, who's a fantastic player, but for me, that's kind of the final, I would like to see, just because I think it'd be fascinating.
I completely agree.
If I could pick a final before the whole tournament, that would be it. So it's like, yeah, so it's looking like that is possible. There's a lot to happen still yet, of course, but
I have to say, there would be excitement in many of those matchups. Imagine also like Ding against Anish. Ding is ready for the candidates. Yeah. Anish just about missed it. Yeah. And he would then be eager to show that I should have been in the candidates.
Yeah, and Ding mentioned in his interview yesterday, he's made it to the semi-finals several times actually on the tour, but he's never got to a final yet. So it'll be depressing for Ding if he gets beaten again. He always seems to meet with Magnus Carlsen in the semi-finals. It's just like this big boss blockading your path to the winning the tournament.
Always on the wrong side of the bracket.
Yeah, I mean, Ding, we're writing him off. I mean, this game is looking very, very difficult for him now, just because Black can barely move. But he will have White in the last game. Even if he falls to defeat here, he can strike back. So, yeah, all four finals. I mean, anyone could get to the final here.
And then, of course, Prag again. If he goes to the final, he has to start off tomorrow with exams.
Yeah.
And then start playing again.
I wonder whether he'll get, like, special dispensation or something, I
was wondering, why on earth is he bothering? I mean, he's clearly going to be, like, a chess professional. Yeah. Just pull out of school. You don't need to go. Why is he even bothering?
Kids, don't listen to Simon.
Stay in school.
No, I'm just saying, unless you're going to be world champion, then it's okay to pull out of school. But I mean, if you're that strong and your future's going to be chess, he doesn't need to learn about some engineering stuff. Okay, bad advice, but I can see why he's doing it.
Sometimes you have to finish the school with certain qualifications, right? It's a must.
Yeah, you probably have to, and it is obviously good to get an education.
Yeah,
I hear. So like, yeah, but I mean, he's playing the world champion, maybe. So that what's more important?
Exactly. Well, I do see the bar maybe slightly over to Anish Giri's side in Game 3. Anish has to make a comeback because Prag is in the lead in that match. And in this one, the bar is, creeping up for Magnus more and more. David has been saying it for a long time. It looks really good for the world champion in this game.
Yeah, and he's really playing with all the angles, all the geometrical kind of motifs here, Magnus. He's just lifted his rook up one square. This rook's gone a real journey, but the rook now on the 4th rank pins Black's pawn on the f-file to the Black bishop. So just trying to completely immobilize Black. And Ding, he's trying to be active. I think he's doing the right thing. He's pushing pawns. He's trying to create a distraction. If White's pieces get distracted, or if White's pieces get traded off, especially the bishops, then Ding might be okay. Temporarily, he's still a pawn up. So, okay, can Magnus up the pressure? And if so, how? Maybe the White e-pawn can step forward. Maybe White's dark squared bishop. There's so much choice. I think the one trap that Magnus shouldn't fall into in this position, because he is a pawn down, is taking this guy. Viewers at home might wonder, why not take a pawn back? Why not restore the material balance? The reason is because after a trade here, for example, Black can start getting pieces off the board. Black can start trading rooks, trading pieces, and maybe there will be a path to survival. Maybe Black just moves across and starts targeting your pawns. I think you shouldn't free up your opponent with exchanges, even if you win a pawn in the process. So in this position, Magnus has brought his bishop forward, kicking away this Black rook. And I think the reason is, if the Black rook, for example, challenges the bishop, he might well offer the exchange, but he'll offer it in a way that gives him a passed pawn. Still not convinced by this, to be honest, but White does have a very dangerous passed pawn now. Eddie has become David, the d-pawn, and meanwhile, this pawn is still under fire as well.
It's certainly good for Magnus, but it's not winning by any means here. I mean, I think what you're showing on the board here is very likely to occur, but there's going to be more exchanges, and Black can start attacking that d-pawn now, maybe by, I don't know, rook d8 or rook f6, one of these moves.
But, yeah.
And, OK, I mean, yeah, you might win the a-pawn, but pawns are getting swapped off pretty quickly here. And the more pawns that get swapped off, the nearer to a potential draw And I think Ding Liren would be very happy just to swap some pieces off and get out the bind. He's been under this bind for so long that this looks like quite a big improvement to me, actually, for Black on what's happened previously. So.
Yeah. And I was just going to add, you know, the optimist in Black should actually be looking at the fact that Ding also has a passed pawn, Freddie, the f-pawn, which, you know, if Magnus misplays things, could be something to be happy about.
Yeah, it's not that far away from promotion at some point. So, yeah, this one is definitely something to keep an eye on. In the current position, Ding's rook is under attack, however, and he should move it. Couple of squares he can choose from. He can slide across one square, as we just showed, or he can maybe slide across the whole way, but that looks a bit odd. It's just stuck behind his own bishop.
Much more natural to play the attacking move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And only 2 minutes left on the clock for Ding now.
Yeah, that's one worrying thing. I mean, if he can't just kind of completely clarify the tension, if he can't trade bishops, trade rooks, get rid of pawns, like Simon was indicating, then the clock will become a factor. But if he can get rid of pieces, then I think he'll be much happier. Okay.
I'm not sure why he spent so long on that move. It seemed pretty obvious. And, OK, he's gone for a much more passive approach here. And this is where things can go wrong. You know, he's been passive the whole game. I don't know why he doesn't want to get out of that passive, you know, that passive kind of way of going. And you know, this move might be all right, but now Magnus can maybe cash in on his good play so far, can't he? Just by starting to capture some bits.
Yeah,
capture B7, capture A6, this kind of stuff. And he's going to have a lot of passed pawns in the position with the white pieces.
Start with this pawn. If the black rook moves, you can maybe consider this pawn. I guess Ding's idea is that he wants to get active with one black rook, and actually the white king might be a bit of a factor. The white king lacking some safe squares. For example, if you step forward, the black bishop can start coming to check you on this diagonal. Magnus, therefore, before going pawn hunting, before getting greedy and grabbing this pawn, which isn't really running away, he captures here. And after black takes back, maybe the same idea. Maybe you just take this pawn. Maybe you just bring your king forward and start going after Freddie, the f-pawn that Jovanka mentioned as a potential kind of threat for black. This pawn is quite strong. Okay, key moment. Does Magnus get greedy, cash in? I think it's very human. I would be too tempted. I think I see a pawn, I take a pawn. But Magnus has hesitated.
Yeah, there's a couple of tempting moves there, aren't there? But maybe... And he's gone for another option. He's trying to activate his rook on the 7th rank. This is the kind of position he plays very well normally, but, OK, you can see the valuation bar has changed. I don't know if that's going to give black some hope.
So you don't think it's a bad move?
I don't think it's really a bad move. I don't think it's a blunder, but it's maybe there was some better moves here in the position previously.
But it's the kind of move that puts pressure, right, on Ding?
Yeah, especially with the time situation.
Exactly,
so it's a very practical move as well. And his internet's gone again. Look at it, God, here. But he does look so happy. I've never seen him smile so much in a picture.
He should win this game with that smile on his face.
Can't you get a miserable picture of him for the last one? You know, just him like, scowling, you know, so he's...
According to the position that he's in, you know, have, like, smile.
Yeah.
You can change it depending.
Yeah,
that'd be clever. Yeah.
Well, but we prefer the webcams because then we get the live image of that, right? The big smiles and the frustration.
Yeah.
And it is frustration for Ding. Look at him. You can see it on his body language, how frustrated and nervous he is. I mean, 1 minute on the clock.
Yeah, and still a lot of problems to solve for black. We mentioned some of the pawns under fire, but it's the white rook coming in, and Jovanka mentioned this is an annoying move to face. Here we see the Stockfish evaluation, Stockfish moves. Only one move keeps the balance for black. It's not that obvious, I would say. It's definitely possible to find this. The best move for black is to actually move the black rook on the f-file down the board 2 squares, hitting white's pawn in the middle, David, the d-pawn, the far advanced pawn, but that does require some calculation. Do we think he's going to find it? Is that natural?
Well, he's only got 40 seconds now. I mean, I would imagine if he hasn't found it by now, he won't find it. I mean, it's so much more normal to try to swap some pieces off. I mean, who wouldn't put the rook on the open file here? I think most people would just go to swap off and pray.
Yeah. Is he going to find it, this rook move? It's the best one by quite a distance. As Simon mentioned, it's maybe more natural, however, to bring one of the black rooks across to challenge white's rook. That's the second best move. It's not losing, but it does give white a big advantage. So, OK.
10 seconds.
10 seconds to find this move. Is he going to find it? Rook to f6
I
for
think
Ding.
he might.
5 seconds?
That move now.
He's found it.
Oh, he's played it. Wow, that's amazing. With so little time, this is why he's world #2, right?
Yeah.
To find moves like that is incredible with so little time left on the clock. So
he's
well
attacking
done,
this
Ding.
pawn now. Yeah, very well done, Ding. And maybe one of the ideas is actually to go after the white king. So you've actually cleared a path for your other rook to swing across. For example, if the white bishop takes your pawn, the other black rook's going to swing across and start hitting the white king now. And for example, if the white king moves forward, there are ideas such as the rooks lining up. And it's an endgame, but you're going on the attack. So it's still very complicated. But he found the best move.
This is the difference as well with these players. I mean, they can cope so well with the pressure. I mean, most mortals there would just start crumbling. They look at their clock, 10 seconds left, and they would do some desperate move. But these guys, they find rook f6. That keeps the game alive. Really impressive stuff from Ding. And it's not, to my eyes, this is just not so clear. I mean, white is better, but it's not that obvious. We're also you've called it David the D pawn. But maybe it should be Ding the
D pawn.
Ding the D pawn, or Ding Dong. If it queens.
Ding Dong if it queens.
Yeah, as we go down.
King Ding if it queen.
King Ding, yeah.
King Ding. OK, but key moment now. This pawn is actually under fire, so Magnus needs to defend it. And the only way that I see to defend it is to move your bishop out the way. For example, by taking this pawn, now you defend it with your rook. But as soon as this bishop moves, as we mentioned, this square is lost. Magnus has lost control of. So this would be a very annoying check. So Magnus now, he's spending his time just trying to work out the consequences of this check. He decides he doesn't want to allow it. But now stepping his bishop back, he's keeping an eye on the square, so the black rook can't use it. But he's lost a lot of time, and Ding is lining up now against the D pawn. Black's rook indirectly is going to start attacking it soon. And things turning around.
Do you think he's going to... I'm going to say he's going to hold it now.
Yeah.
OK, we've got to have a little
it was
bet.
all due to this move, rook f6, the star move that he found with 5 seconds left.
If he wins that, if he wins the D pawn, then he should be OK, right?
Yes, totally should be. I just thought of a rhyme from The Wizard of Oz.
OK, let's hear it.
Ding dong, the pawn is gone.
I like it. Ding dong, the pawn is gone.
Isn't it like ding dong, the witch is dead?
Yeah.
Is that how it goes?
It is, yeah. I think that was used for something else, wasn't it?
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. But no, it's all yeah. But yeah, no, that is from The Wizard of Oz. I can remember the only time I watched Wizard of Oz, if you watch it to Dark Side of the Moon, it's in June. That's something I did at university. I don't know if anyone else has done that. No. OK, move on quickly. So, no. But yeah, I think he's going to hold it now. I think he's got great chances. And Magnus now has slowed down as well, so which indicates he's not maybe as happy.
I wish we could see Magnus, because I have a feeling he's shaking his head right now. I have a feeling he's just thinking, oh, I had full control, 100% control of the position. Look at the black bishop in the centre of the board. Look at the black rook behind it. Those pieces were on their starting squares just 10 moves ago. Stuck, immobilised, unable to break out. And now those pieces, they're in the game. They're about to improve even further. And remember, black is still 1 pawn up. Magnus, he was going after a few pawns. He had the option of grabbing another couple of black pawns. He didn't take that option. And he's got nothing to show for it, Magnus Carlsen. I don't really see what he does now. The white rook in the centre of the board can go up to the 7th rank, but actually everything's defended in black's camp.
He's having a big think about it, and what's he going for? So he's bringing this in, and now...
Check.
Yeah, and black's got his pieces out of the position. And the bishop coming to c6 is going to be tremendous as well in some cases.
White's king is actually a big target. White's king is not safe.
Could he lose this one? You know,
it's... might see a full 360.
Yeah, it's possible. At least.
Ooh, wow, what a tense match. These two are really bringing their A-game.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this. We've seen this all the time, you know, that one side puts the other under pressure and the other one rises to the occasion. And here, it's phenomenal defence by Ding. I agree with you, Simon. I think he might be in trouble, Magnus.
It's quite hard to adjust, isn't it? When you know you're doing fantastically well and suddenly, like, hang on a minute, I should be doing well. You have to tell yourself not to try win too much, and that's when you can end up losing the game. And look at this bishop now, striking across the board, combined with a black rook coming in. You can also maybe just try to take this pawn in the centre. You know, Magnus is okay, don't get me wrong, in this position, but it's changing, and that's when it gets different psychologically, difficult psychological, even if you're the world champion. So I don't know. I mean, he's got to be careful, right?
I mean, if Magnus loses this pawn, he has no winning chances at all.
Yeah.
He's destined to just defend a difficult position. So I'm wondering what happens if Magnus pushes forward, trying to keep this pawn alive. It's defended now by both white's rooks, but the black rook is going to start breaking through with a series of checks. And here, for example, rook takes rook simply, and black can remove this pawn from the board, maybe with his rook, maybe with his bishop, and black is 2 pawns up.
2 pawns. Maybe even here, white's just about okay because of white's activity. But Magnus didn't like that, so he understands he has to keep that pawn on the board. But now
he's going for a rook trade.
I mean, is there an immediate perpetual if black wants it? Maybe.
Oh,
so
possibly.
Black could give a check, hitting the white king. The white king has to step back this way to defend its rook. And Simon, you think maybe a check? The white king stepping back and a draw.
Well, I mean, I think here,
he's playing for the win.
He's playing for the win. He's bringing his king in. He's a pawn up. Why not play for the win? Yeah. Your bishop is fantastic. You're material up. You're bringing your king to the centre. You've got to take advantage of these opportunities.
Yeah. Playing for the win.
Magnus has to be so careful now. I mean, you're just a pawn down at the moment for nothing. I think you have to really try and find a genius way to save this game at this point. OK, the white bishop stepping back. The thing is, the black king can enter the centre of the board, actually helping to attack this pawn. But I think the pawn is just going to step up, and maybe you can't round it up. Maybe that's the one problem for Ding here. This pawn is kept alive by its rook and its bishop. It does tie down black's army in the meantime, and we're going to see this position. And Magnus, he has nothing else. He does have to push this pawn all the way forward. What next for Ding? That is the big question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Magnus is trying to get rid of the bishops to get to... OK, that's an interesting move, but to try and simplify, I thought he was, but maybe that doesn't work. To try and simplify into a rook and pawn ending and get a draw that way. But it's black who's pushing here, definitely.
You have to keep your bishop defending this pawn, most likely. I mean, you could move away, or you could step back. Stepping back would make a lot of sense, just defending this pawn. I think this is the most likely, the safest. But, for example, you could contemplate taking this pawn off the board.
I was going to say, why can't you just take it?
Yeah, suddenly you lose control over this pawn. So black can now remove... OK, we have seen a different move, but here we could see, for example, pieces getting traded. I think this would end in a draw. Instead, we have seen, if we go back to the game position, the bishops have left the board, and now it's all about this pawn. Black is going back to take it with his rook, but now white is going on a hunt as well for some pawns himself.
I mean, I thought this was fine for Magnus. I thought this is his idea to swap the bishops off, try to simplify into this rook and pawn ending. And I don't think I think this is now... Too many things are getting exchanged off. I think it's calming down eventually here, heading towards a draw now. So
black's still 1 pawn up, but this pawn is attacked and this pawn is attacked. We might end up in a rook endgame with the same number of pawns, and it's just going to be a dead draw. And here we go. Ding, he has secured the draw pretty much. All of the pawns are just getting wiped out. We're going to end up with just king and rook versus king and rook. Nothing else to do here.
Wow, very exciting game. I mean, there was a lot of action there. I mean, Magnus, brilliant opening idea, but then he kind of allowed Ding to escape there. And, you know, there's not much between these two, are there, at the moment? So.
And we did see a reaction from Ding. I'm wondering if that was like frustration, I didn't actually win it, or just, all right, a draw, white pieces in the final rapid game.
Yeah, I think that game was just extremely stressful, so he needs to get out of there as quickly as possible, needs to refresh himself, needs to reset, and yeah, white in the last game. I think Ding is maybe the favourite now. After defending a difficult position like that, he will feel unbeatable.
What a semi-final match, you guys, between world number 1 and world number 2.